Today we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence, and I believe Miss Pam Williams, you are an expert in this area. Can you tell us just a little bit about your background, how you got into uh, working with emotional intelligence?
Absolutely. In past lives and in current life as well, I do leadership education and development. And one of the topics that has been at the forefront, it really started to become a buzzword about 10 years ago, was emotional intelligence. And the organization that I worked for it weaved this into our leadership development across the organization. So I was one of the first people to raise my hand and said I wanted to get a certification in this because it is one of those things that no matter how old you get, you can always practice good emotional intelligence. It just really requires that you pay attention. And once I started to really dive into it head first and learn everything that I could, practicing it became easy. It's one of those things that once you learn how to do it and you practice it every day, it just becomes a part of your life. It's like learning how to tie your shoes or how to ride a bike. You don't ever forget it. And it's very easy to become just a way of life for you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. So tell us, what is emotional intelligence?
So I'm going to give you a clinical definition first, and then I'm going to break that down into simple terms. So it's really defined as the ability to perceive, use, understand, manage, and handle your emotions. People with high emotional intelligence, of course, can recognize their own emotions and feelings, as well as recognizing it from other people. So what does that mean? That means that when you're having a conversation with a person, or if you get a very strong stimulus, that's something coming in to you, you understand what's happening. You can recognize in another person's face how they're feeling by their body language, their facial expressions, things that they don't say versus things that they do say. And then you can adjust yourself to accommodate that. When I say a strong stimulation that comes in, I'm talking about things that you were not expecting. So very unexpected things that happen that catches you off guard. People that are highly emotionally intelligent can actually stop themselves in the moment, be able to assess, and then make an informed decision. So when you practice emotional intelligence, you are paying attention and recognizing your patterns of behavior that drives the things that you do.
Okay. So we all have emotional intelligence to some form or fashion.
We absolutely all have emotional intelligence, and we have it to a higher degree than we understand. It really is about paying attention to ourselves and paying attention to what our bodies are telling us, because, you know, you've heard that saying that says, you know, when this thing happened to me, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Yes. That's a very true fact, because the amygdala, which is in the center part of your brain, is what controls your emotions. And if you get a very strong stimulus that's coming in, that piece of your brain is connected to a vein that goes down your back. So when that stimulus comes in, that blood is rushing up to your brain. It does make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. So that's a true statement. It is your ability to understand what's happening, and then what you do from there is what really drives good emotional intelligence.
Okay. So how do we develop emotional intelligence? Is this something that we're born with, or through interacting with people, does it develop?
Well, the first thing I would say, Max, is that you've got to want to do it. Okay. Because to say or to think that it is an automatic thing that happens, it absolutely is not. You've got to truly want to do it, and you have to pay attention. So I've said that several times here. The main thing is we all have something called conscious competence. So if you think about things that you can do unconsciously, and I'll give you a good one, and it happens all the time to people. You were coming home from work and you pulled up at your house and you say, I do not even remember leaving the office, right? Because unconsciously, your body, your brain knows how to get you home, especially if you didn't have any detours. You take
Right.
the same route every day, then that becomes ingrained in your brain of how to get there. So you're not really paying attention unless there's a accident, or unless, again, you had a detour or you had to make a stop on the way home. Well, conscious competence, of course, is just the opposite of that. That is paying attention and understanding what is happening in the moment. So when you get those very aggressive, very detailed, very determined or emotions that come on that hit you like a rock, you can then say, okay, what is happening here and how do I need to react? Now, I'm not saying that you become a robot, because that's not what this is at all. It is more of you understanding what's happening and being able to rationalize what you're going to do next. So rationalize your next behavior. When you're not paying attention and a stimulus come in that's very hot and heavy, then you're very reactionary. And that happens all the time, right? Someone says something to you, or someone cuts you off in traffic. The first thing you do is start yelling and screaming or cussing at the steering wheel or whatever that is, right?
Right.
But if you think about it, a person cuts you off in traffic. Do you know why? Most of the time, the answer is no, right?
Correct.
The person could be late to an appointment. The person could be on their way to an emergency. The person may not have seen you. There's all kinds of things that could have occurred.
Correct.
But road rage is not the answer.
No, definitely not.
Right. So you stop and you think, okay, what should I do in this situation? Should I chase after the person? Should I lay on my horn? Or should I say, that person is in much more of a hurry than I am, so let them go ahead. And I'm okay. I'm safe. I am not injured. My car is okay, and I can keep moving forward. Okay, it set me back 2 seconds.
Right.
Is that a matter of life or death? Most of the time, it is not.
Correct. So
conscious competence, basically, it forces us to pay attention, and it also helps us to recognize our patterns of behavior, because everybody has a default thing that they do, right? When they don't know what to do, they default to whatever that behavior is that can get them to the next stage or the next step. Emotional intelligence allows you to analyze and to think about what you're going to do. So you are making decisions based on rational thought rather than impulse.
Okay. So emotional intelligence is not just going off, in a sense, half-cocked emotionally, like you said, with the road rage, just going after the person because you feel that anger and, you know, how dare they and all that comes into play. But it's being able to take a step back and, as you said, you know, consciously assess the situation and not allow your emotions to get the best of you, but be able to control them and to release them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So just being able to know what's happening in the moment and then making an informed choice about how you're going to move forward.
Okay. That is interesting. My next question would be the features of emotional intelligence.
So I learned emotional intelligence based on a model from a company called 6seconds.org. Love those folks there. They put a lot of great work and understanding into developing the emotional intelligence. But there's 3 key components of it. One of them is knowing yourself. The other one is choosing yourself. And the other one is giving of yourself or giving yourself. So when you know yourself, honestly, that is the first rule of thumb in anything that you do. Knowing yourself, being able to recognize your patterns of behavior, and then being able to reflect on what could I have done differently to make this outcome differently. So knowing yourself is the biggest piece of it, because then you become self-aware, and then you really do become the person that other people see you as versus the person you think they see you as. So that's the first one. The second one is choosing yourself, and that is about making decisions with intentionality, because you've thought about the consequences of your actions, of your behavior, things that you do or don't do, and you make a decision based on that. Again, as I said earlier, this is not something that's going to take you 20 minutes to make a decision. You are making decisions pretty rapidly because you're weighing those consequences in your head. If I go left, what's going to be the outcome? If I go right, what is going to be the outcome? And then you make the choice based on what the anticipated best outcome is. Again, the outcome, I say best outcome to mean that outcome may not satisfy everyone, and that is okay, but it is the best outcome for the situation. In this space also, you understand how to do something called navigate your emotions. And what that basically means, everybody has done this, and you may not have thought of it in this way, but basically what it is you have a stimulus that happens, but you can't deal with it in that moment. So what you do is put it in a space where it's safe, and then you can pick it up later. And I'll give you a good example of this.
Okay.
You come home one day and your house is burning, right?
Okay, house is burning.
House is burning, and you know all is lost. In that moment, do you break down and cry and sit in your front yard for 3 days having this meltdown? Or do you think, okay, what are my next steps? People that are emotionally intelligent absolutely understand this is a very tragic event that has occurred, but there's more to it. There's things that I need to have happen. I need to make sure no one's in the house, everyone's safe. I can contact my insurance company, find me a place to stay, all of those things. And once you get settled, then you have that a moment where you break down and cry. I'm not saying that you can't do it in the beginning, you absolutely can, but emotionally intelligent people understand it has occurred. At this point, there's nothing I can do about it. What do I need to do next? And these people who are emotionally intelligent have that same mindset, even in death, in birth, in very joyous occasions, and in very sad occasions, because they understand how to evolve in this. Another thing that they have is emotional intelligence people are highly optimistic. They look for the good in things. And if you truly believe that there is good in every situation, you will find it, even if it's not immediate. So when you choose yourself, those things help you to understand how to make decisions with intentionality, how to apply those consequences to your decision, how to be optimistic about things, and how to put your emotions in a place where they're safe until you can have those true emotions. Now, I'll go back and say one other thing in this choosing yourself piece is that you have to experience a wide range of emotions to understand how to deal with them. Meaning, optimistic people are great, but you need to be optimistic and a realist at the same time. So you can't look at life through rose-colored glasses. You have to look at life through realistic lensed glasses, right?
Right.
So understanding the difference between those two definitely helps you put things in perspective. And then the last one of giving yourself is all about your legacy. What are people going to say about you? One, when you're not in the room, when you're dead and gone, when you are running for mayor. What have you done? What behaviors have you displayed that people are talking very positively about you? So this is all about how empathetic are you? Are you a person that definitely understands other people's feelings, their pains, their desires, but you're not overly compensating for that by being sympathetic? So there's a huge difference between empathy and sympathy, and you can get those two confused. When you overconnect and another person's burden become your burden, then that's not empathy. Empathy is saying, I truly understand how you feel. And there may be times that you don't understand, and it's okay for you to say that. I've never been in this situation, so I don't understand how you feel, but I can relate to what you're telling me.
Okay.
And then the last thing is, you never want to tell a person, if I were you, I would do this or I would do that, because you're not them.
Correct.
People have to make their own choices. So when you talk about the key features are understanding who you are at a very core level, making decisions with intentionality because you weighed out the consequences, and what is your legacy going to be?
Okay. So those three components are, that's what makes up emotional intelligence.
Those three components help you to live and practice it, and they make up a set of components that have many subsets that go with them, but those are foundational pieces.
Okay, thank you for that. You may have already answered this, but are there different types of emotional intelligence, or is it just one one type of experience for us?
Well, emotional intelligence is one thing. I will say it that way. Okay. But it's not a standalone thing. There is three pieces that goes with emotional, or there's three pieces of the quotient piece. So emotional intelligence and emotional quotient are interchangeable. They're one in the same. The quotient piece is what I want to focus on to talk about the three pieces that go together. So when we talk about your intellect, so there's three Qs. There's IQ, EQ, and SQ. So Indigo Q, Edward Q, and Sierra Q. Three
Okay.
Qs, right?
Right.
And they really work in tandem. So when we talk about your intellect, intellectual quotient, that is what, in layman's term, people say how smart you are. That's right. Going to vary from person to person, and everyone has it, right?
Right.
And the IQ is that thing that helps you get the job, so to speak, no matter what that job is. And I'm not saying, you're working at the post office or you're a dentist or any of that. I'm saying that your IQ is that thing that helps you get that place that you want to be, correct?
Correct.
And everybody has it. It's going to vary from person to person. Your EQ, which is your emotional quotient, is what helps you keep that particular thing. So if you get a particular job and you understand how to check your emotions or keep them in a space where you're not that person that's a hothead or very egotistical or yelling and screaming at people. So your EQ really helps you keep the job.
Okay.
Your SQ, which is your social quotient, helps you thrive in a job. And that is all about how do you build and maintain relationships. And sales folks are really good at this because they understand to make a dollar, I've got to build a relationship with the person.
Right.
So your IQ helps you get the job, your EQ helps you keep the job, your SQ helps you thrive in the job. And those three work in tandem. If you get a good balance between the three of those, success generally will be yours.
Okay. So you talked about the EQ, that's the emotional part, to something we can relate to in a job. That's what helps you keep the job.
Right.
IQ is your knowledge or intelligence.
Absolutely.
You are the knowledge that you have, I guess, in the sense for that particular area.
Right.
Lastly, we have your social quotient is how you relate to people.
Absolutely.
And keeping relationships. And that's definitely something that I work on with my clients. Definitely the relationship building is very important.
Very important.
Very important. So do men and women have different EQs, or is it just more so the individual?
Well, absolutely. Men and women are going to see things very differently because men are from Mars and women are from Venus, right?
Exactly.
So when we talk about emotional intelligence, though, yes, it's going to be gender based in that, again, men are going to see things the way that they see them, women are going to see things the way that they see them. However, when we come down to the core and the basics of it, everybody wants to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of what your gender is.
Mm-hmm.
Men definitely are going to see respect gender differences when they're around all men, and it's going to be different when they're around women. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying it's a fact because of the way the men brain works, the way the woman brain or the female brain works versus the male brain works.
Okay. All right. So again, it sounds like your emotional intelligence is affected by your relationships with others, how you see the world, your ability to attach to or understand your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as you said, being in the moment, being able to step away from those high emotionality things, and being able to assess, determine the right plan or action to take.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about maybe age with the emotional intelligence.
You know, I love this one because we've all heard people that were mature in age, and I'll let you determine what mature means to you. But people that are mature in age say, I have the right to say that because I'm this age or I'm that age.
Mm-hmm.
That's a falsehood. It has nothing to do with age. As a matter of fact, the older you get, the more you should really practice emotional intelligence. Because, you know, if you have a sharp tongue and you think you can say what you want to say, it can be offensive to other people. Emotionally intelligent people understand that they can't say anything to anyone or about anyone and expect it to be acceptable, regardless of how old you get.
Correct. So, I know when I'm working with individuals and children, I guess in particular, we often indicate that their chronological age may not be in keeping with their emotional age, if that makes sense. You know,
well, if you think about it, men's frontal lobe in their brain don't develop, or actually we all are, our frontal lobe brain does not develop until we're in our 30s, completely all the way developed, right?
Right.
And that's the decision-making part of the brain. So when we think about people decision-making or their behavior commiserate with their age, there are studies, of course, that say that men develop this skill a lot later in life than women do because of that brain development.
Right.
However, you can start with teenagers, and you can start actually in middle school with helping children to understand the consequences of their decisions and or their actions. And once they start to develop that and be a part of the emotional intelligence community where they're learning this at an early age, it just fosters a great environment for them to be very productive and make good decisions in their teenage years, their early 20 years, and well beyond that. You see them then start to be more engaged at school, get better grades, not engage in activities that they could potentially not recover from, not fighting, and being not necessarily the peacekeeper, but definitely having much more understanding and that social intelligence than their peers who don't practice it or don't know it or don't understand it.
Right. Well, that was going to be one of my questions in the sense of, can we apply emotional intelligence training to children or teens? And it sounds like you're saying yes, it would be a good thing in the sense of helping them learn how to negotiate, helping them to understand their inner feelings, understand that just because you have that feeling does not mean you have to act on it right away, but there's
Absolutely.
taking into consideration consequences, how that's going to affect other people, and
Hmm.
as you said, not doing something that's going to affect me for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. And, I talked about the company that I worked with in getting my certification in emotional intelligence. They have a huge catalog of youth programs that they sponsor in schools to help children start to develop and understand emotional intelligence at the middle school, high school level.
Great. So, I mean, it leads right into another question I was going to ask in the sense of, can you grow or increase your emotional intelligence? So it sounds like you can.
You absolutely can. There is no age limit to this. There is no, if I didn't start this by 35, I shouldn't start it. No, it's nothing like that at all. You can get off the phone with me today and start practicing emotional intelligence, because the one thing that you can do is just pay attention to what's happening. And when something happens, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, just pay attention to your behavior and think about, could I have behaved differently in this thing? And if the answer is yes, then you start to think further into that. Okay, I am going to pay attention the next time this thing happened, and my response is going to be different. It is really just that simple. However, putting it into action requires, again, that you are looking inwardly at yourself. And,
Right.
do it in blocks. Here's what I tell people when they first start out practicing emotional intelligence, is to do it in blocks. At the end of each week, do some reflection on your week. Were you able to accomplish all the things that you wanted to accomplish personally and professionally? If the answer is no, what stood in your way? And then think about that. Also, think about the last engagement that you had that you felt was unpleasant. How could you have handled it differently? What were the drivers? What were the triggers for you that made you react the way you did? And how can you not do that the next time? So it's as simple as you and your significant other coming home from work and saying, okay, what are we having for dinner tonight? And this happens every day.
All the
What are we having
time.
for dinner, right? And the
Yeah.
other person says, I don't know, what do you want? And you say, I don't know, what do you want? Then that person says, I want Chinese. And you go, no, I don't want Chinese. But you could have said Chinese in the beginning. We can have anything but Chinese, right? But you didn't
Right.
say that. And then it ends up where both of you are exhausted and you said, okay, forget it. I'll just have an egg sandwich and go to bed.
Uh-huh.
Right. So think about that. Again, making those decisions. If the person says, what are we having for dinner tonight? Well, I was thinking we could go to this new restaurant down the street that just opened, 3 weeks ago. I'd love to try it out and actually get your take on it, because it could become one of our favorites.
Okay.
Or whatever you like, I'm not picky. And then when
Well,
you say that, be true to that.
exactly. I was about to say that because we often say things and we don't really listen to what we're saying. Like, for instance, your example, the spouses come home and what do you want to eat? I don't know. Is it really true you don't know, or you just don't want to take the effort to say it, or you're afraid that if you do give a suggestion, they're going to shoot it down?
Right. Or you don't want to cook. So if you say, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and they say, are you cooking? Then it goes into this spiral and we're back to square one.
It definitely goes into that spiral, because then I think I worked as hard as you, so why should I cook? And then it goes from there.
Absolutely.
So if we're true to ourselves, like knowing yourself, like you said, the very first component of
Mm-hmm.
intelligence, knowing that when I come home, I'm tired, I may not want to make decisions. And if I pick that, then I have to be able to live with the consequence that maybe they will, say they want Chinese, and I'm not really crazy about it, but I can eat it. I can find
Right.
something. And if
And,
you're communicating together, they'll know that, oh, she really doesn't like Chinese, period. So that's not even going to be on the table.
and in the reflection piece, Max, there's bigger pieces to it. That was the most simplest form. But if we
Right,
think about it, and we think about just this conversation we're having now about what do we eat when we get home, if
right.
you want to take this to the next level, then you start to be proactive about things. I know, let me look at my calendar for this week. I'm working late on Wednesday and Thursday. So why don't I plan dinner for 3 days this week, and we can have leftovers, and then there's no discussion. There's food available in the house, and I don't have to worry about it. That's one less thing off of my plate. So a lot of this, when I talk about being reflective, it is setting yourself up for success. It's not about always reflecting on what did I not do. It's also about what are the things that I did good that I need to keep repeating, because they help me get a sense of purpose. They help me get a sense of accomplishments, and I need to practice that more. So you reward yourself for the good behavior that you have, and then the behavior that you want to change, you work on that.
That sounds wonderful. And I think for many people, taking this type of stance and going through this training would be wonderful in the sense of getting your needs met. First of all, understanding what the needs are, knowing
Mm-hmm.
what the resources are, and then working accordingly, as you said, to have more success. Because
Exactly.
do something, like you said, with the eating or the meals, taking that step back, as you said, and just what can I do differently? Plan.
Absolutely. And
Wow.
that's the crux of emotional intelligence, is recognizing those patterns of behavior that get you in a funk. Because at the end of the
Yes.
day, you have a choice of how you're going to feel. You can choose to be happy. Now, I'm not saying that you are turning yourself into Pollyanna. That's not what this is. But it is more about, I understand those triggers for me. So I do things to ensure that those triggers don't catch me off guard, right?
Right.
So I set myself up that I'm, number one, I'm paying attention, but I'm also being proactive about things that are happening. Of course, I can't control everything, but the things that I can control, I do control. And then when those things happen that I can't control, I understand how to manage that. It does not make me upset. It does not put me into a funk. Yes, absolutely. I'm saying you can be upset, but being upset lasts a very short time versus if you had 50 million other things going on and then you got one more thing added on to the top of it, you're about to explode.
Correct. And it's interesting the things that you're saying. I say many of those in therapy, not realizing that's a component of emotional intelligence in the sense of
Absolutely.
control, when it comes to anxiety. Often
Mm-hmm.
individuals take on everybody else's problems and theirs, and they can't figure out why they're so anxious and stressed.
Well,
You
here's the thing. People do not understand the power of the word no.
Oh, that too. Exactly. So knowing the ability to do that, to take care of themselves, to only take on problems that are yours because you can only change your own problems. You can't change someone else's. You can listen, you can be empathetic as you indicated, but I don't have to solve it for you. I don't have to say, this is what I would do, as you had said earlier, allowing the other person to take charge of their problems and you resolve yours, you're going to be less stressed. And I think you're going to find more um, peace in yourself if you do that.
Well, the other piece that is not mentioned in that, you're helping the other person grow. If they're
True.
always looking for someone else to solve their problems, they're never growing and developing. So you talk them through what their options are, their choices are, and then they make the decision. And whatever decision they make, you're happy with because they made the decision. So here's the other thing that people have to be careful about of making decisions for other people. It gives them, number one, a way out, but it also gives them someone to blame.
Thank you. Exactly. It does. I don't have to take responsibility for it. And if it doesn't turn out, then I blame Pam because Pam told me to do this.
Absolutely. So I rarely, if ever, make decisions for other people. I will help them get to a decision, but that decision is going to be theirs and theirs alone.
Correct. And they have to realize that in making that decision, you'll have to live with the consequences, good or bad.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important that we work with children at these young ages to help them understand you made this choice and you cannot blame any other person on it. And, I take this one step further to make it very simple for people to understand. Even in the worst situations, you're standing at the water cooler having a conversation with one of your colleagues, and someone walks past you and accidentally bumps you. I mean, bumps you really hard where it feels like it's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
So you could react and say, what the hell did you do that for? Or you could say, I don't know if you meant to do that, but I was standing here, right?
Right.
So you take less of a bite, you take a bite out of it, and you're not putting the person on the defense. Now, they could have been on their phone, not paying attention. A whole lot of things could have occurred. But your reaction to the situation really drives what the person does on the other side of that. And at the end of the day, you want that person to be whole and you want yourself to be whole.
Exactly. I think you'd mentioned it earlier in the sense of being assertive and not aggressive. So
Absolutely.
Across to the person without tearing them down or physically hurting them or emotionally hurting them. But, in the sense of making your stance, I was standing here and you bumped into me. They might say, so I was on my phone, or, maybe it was intentional. They may say something else, but, you have to decide how you're going to react to that.
Absolutely. And
of your actions.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, it is a learning experience for you.
Right. Definitely. So before we close, what tips could you give to people listening in reference to improving their emotional intelligence?
The first thing that I tell everyone, get to know yourself, get to know who you are, get to know what your triggers are, get to know your behaviors, pay attention to what you do, pay attention to how you come across, be self-aware, because the one thing is true for all of us. I don't care who we are. Behavior never lies. So you can say that you're one way, or you can, think that you're one way, but your behavior tells the truth about you. So get to know yourself. Get to know yourself very intimately. Number 2, pay attention. Have that conscious competence to know what you're doing, how you're doing it, and be reflective on your behavior. What could you do different? And take responsibility for what you're doing and how you're doing it. Because the worst thing that you can do is always blame someone else for what's happening with you. They don't control you. You control yourself. And then lastly, think about, how are people viewing me? What is my legacy? What are people saying about me when I'm not around? If that is positive, that's great, and you're doing some really good things. If it is not, what is it that you're doing, or what you are? What is it about you that needs to change? So I leave you with this. If you find yourself in a situation where you don't know what to do, as your mother told you when you were a kid, or if you're a child listening, count to 10 before you make a decision. I'm not saying take 10 years to count to 10. I'm saying take 10 seconds or 5 seconds to count to 10 and think about what just happened and what do you need to do to make this a positive resolution. So that would be what I would say are things that you could do immediately after listening to this podcast. You can turn it off and immediately start to practice emotional intelligence. Read as much as you can, because there's always good information out there. And I thoroughly believe in emotional intelligence. It's truly changed my life.
Well, thank you so much, Pam Williams, for that. That was wonderful. A great, you gave us a lot of information, great information to think about. And, emotional intelligence isn't such a mysterious word or entity to us anymore. We're understanding that clearly. I would love for you to come back and talk some more about emotional intelligence. I am hopeful that individuals listening to the podcast will leave some comments and maybe some questions that we can come back and definitely address those. And I'm sure there's, many ways that we can delve into emotional intelligence and allow all of us to understand more effectively, to understand our emotions more thoroughly, to interact in ways that are going to be productive for ourselves and others, and to really take ownership of ourselves, which is important to do.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back anytime. Just let me know, and I'd be more than happy to answer questions, come back and talk more about it.